Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature,
where we apply the revolutionary MOTS skill
to classic and contemporary works of prose.
So, join us once again, won't you?
Hello, and welcome back to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature. Today we're talking about another short story. This is going to be the short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula Lagann. I am going to be your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Jonathan E. Manzer.
Hello.
Scott Thurlow.
And I am a child in a cage.
And Christopher Morgan.
Hello.
So, with that said, why don't we just jump into it? I don't think we're going to do a log line.
I don't have a log line, yeah.
And we didn't, you know what? This one's on me. I'm hosting, and we didn't discuss this beforehand, so I'm just going to jump right into plot with Ian. Get us going.
So, before we begin, though, I do want to say that this is a type of story that shows the limits of the system we grade stories.
Yeah, that's very much true.
Because this is more of a experimental piece. If I can just casually throw that kind of like categorization out there.
I got you.
The idea is it's describing society, but also ceding a lot of the power of the author to the reader to imagine a society that is near perfectly happy. But the idea is that it's not, they describe certain aspects of the society, but they also say that it's up to you to imagine for yourself how that society is crafted, and in order for a more impactful philosophical point. And the idea then is suggesting that the society's happiness, and whatever you imagine that happiness to be, is built upon the required suffering of one child who is basically caged, as to your description earlier, Scott, and that some people, everyone kind of knows that almost a trolley problem-esque thing of the sacrifice of one for the good of the entirety. Some people can handle that and accept that as a useful foundation for the society. Other people end up deciding to leave because they can't handle that. And it kind of leaves on a more of a philosophical musing kind of story versus a strict narrative story.
Yes, exactly.
That being said, again, this is the limits of our system. I really enjoyed the story, but it's more of a philosophical thought piece than it is a narrative story.
Narrative unto. Yeah.
And so this is actually going to probably get a pretty low score from me, but not because of any of the fault of the work, just because we happen to have a very strict way we grade these stories. So I'm probably going to give it a 1 or a 2, because it's more of a description and then posing a philosophical quandary to you. So perhaps more towards a 2, but I want to hear what you guys have to say about it.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, everything you said. I was initially going to give it a 1 because of our rigid scale, but saying I'm going to give it a 2 to give it the benefit of the doubt is not fair. I'm going to give it a 2 because you made a good point that this is the writer. This is kind of, for lack of a better word, this is more interactive. The writer is setting a stage and you are to interpret it. You are to take her symbols and find your own meaning to them. It is definitely a thought piece, but it is a shared narrative, if I may. So I'm going to give it a 2 because, and I don't mean to be like benefit of the doubt, but it is a shared narrative. I believe that was its intent. So I'm going to give it a 2.
Steve, real quick, did you say what year this was published in or first written?
I didn't, but it was 1973.
73, right? So I guess before I say like my thoughts on it, like I feel as if I have to mention something like it's very much within the vein of like, this is not an insult per se, but like the sort of hippie sci-fi wave that was like happening in and around that time, which Ursula was very much part of, and like other writers too. Like I would say Philip K. Dick, of course, one of my favorites, certainly was in that same sphere. So yes, as you guys said, that it's more of a philosophical thought piece presented as ostensibly a story, right? But there's not much narrative with a capital N, if you will, like to it. But I think that's not the point. The point is to present something to you and force you to sort of engage with it more than you might versus a traditional, in quotes again, short story like this. So I think I might follow suit with you, Chris. Like one for that, like it certainly has elements to it, while not maybe a lot is happening. She definitely presents a scene and then presents as you said, a sort of philosophical quandary, or at least a moral conundrum in a sense, right? So I think I'll give it 2 points for that and call it that for the plot.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is like almost a Twilight Zone episode.
Kind of.
So it's like maximum level. Like imagine, if you will, a world where like everything is perfect except for, yeah, exactly. Like that's the whole thing is this whole world that is being set forth is like a thought experiment, right? Like it's the author saying like, imagine that this world is perfect. And then you find out that all this perfectness depends on every evil act that humanity like has within it is like put onto this one person, right? Like all the evil goes onto this one child, and that's what the cost is, right? And are you going to be one of the ones that stays, or are you going to be the ones that walks away? And that's the entire point of the title, right?
The titular walkers.
And we're getting into themes here for sure. But like in terms of the plot, there's not much of a plot. It's like, I'm going to lay out a scene. Here's the scene. And here's like how this world works. Tell me like, or think about like where you would be in this spectrum of people that stay or leave. And that's it. Like, so you're right. Like there is a world there. There's a well-built world. The setting is set, but the plot isn't really, there's not much of a plot. I guess the plot is your slow like the reader's own slow discovery of what the world is, of the setting, right? Like there's a meta plot almost based around your own slow discovery of what's going on. But in terms of like what's on the page, it's not a plot. It's all setting. It's all explanation of what this thought experiment is. So I probably agree with you guys on a one. Anyway, two of you are trying to talk. One of you get it.
Go, Chris.
Well, we all gave it a 2, but
I was gonna say, I gave it a 2.
I thought you guys said it was 1.
I said I was going to give it a 1, but I ended up giving it 2 at least for me.
All right. I said it was a shared narrative, but just before we go any further, and because especially since we're going to go into themes, is there a precedent where we examine a piece of lit and we don't use the MOTS scale?
I don't think so. The whole point of this of our podcast is to use the MOTS
I
scale.
mean, I know we do this, but I could have sworn.
Depends on what you count as lit. Like we've done a bunch of philosophical episodes about things that we've read and not using the MOTS scale. What? Why? Why do you?
I'm just going to say.
You want to throw away the MOTS scale? Is that what?
No.
We're not. We're never throwing away the
I mean,
aside from I think the recipe for seduction, which we threw away for that.
We still MOTS'd it. We still gave it a score on the scale.
I don't think we. Oh no. Never mind.
All right, go on.
The point I want to say is that the reason I'm giving it a 2 is particularly because you said you framed it as a Twilight Zone where you go, imagine if you will. However, Ursula constructed this really well over not establishing, slowly asking you that question.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're already she develops the world that you're seeing kind of in her perfection of what a great society would be. And then she steps back and again, cedes a little bit of power and then asks questions throughout so that if it was upfront about imagine a world, your perfect existence, it wouldn't be an effective piece because she has to sell you actually crafting that image in your head, which he spends a good 2 pages on the
first half of it,
building this before then asking that, are you willing to commit this act in order to get that perfection? But the sell is what's important. And I think that is one of the better, because it could have just easily been a 3-sentence, Imagine your perfect world. Would you harm one person in order for everyone to have this perfect world? Yes or no? Done. No, she slowly builds, narrates your world into existence.
No, that's really what's sorry.
Active dreamer in her existence. So I think that's my reason for giving it a 2.
That's very well said. And like, yeah, sure, it could be distilled into like just a very simple philosophical question, but it's almost like it's a utopia with a dark secret, right? And like, should I stay or should I go, in a sense? And yeah, I mean, stuff is happening. It's like, they're having a parade. They're like basically setting up a festival. So I say that counts as a plot. And then she drops like in a very well done, like you said, manner, right? She drops like the dark edge to it, like about I don't know, 70% through or so, whatever. So I think that is like the reasoning, like just to bolster the reasoning, I'm going to give it a 2 for plot as well.
Actually, it's. I don't mean to split hairs, but I think it is important to say that it's probably like 45% of the thing. I mean, she spends 2 pages, and at the top of the 3rd page is where she transitions. So she spends just as much time. I'm just trying to reinforce Ian's point, because it is half Utopia and half the cost of Utopia.
Well, if we had more fans, I'm sure somebody would tell us all how much we're wrong about the percentages of this. But that being said, I think we're going to leave it at that. 2s all around, except for me. I think I'm going to stick with a 1 on this. I love this story. I really enjoy it. I don't think there's much plot to it, but I think I probably will try to build back where you may take off some points, everybody else. So we'll find out. So that's going to go on to themes for me. I think that this is exactly what this story is about. It's very strong on themes. The idea of what are you willing to, not only what are you willing to do to other people for your own happiness, and what are you willing to allow to happen to other people for your own happiness, even if it's not you doing it. But like, I love the idea that all of the people here are like, they feel it's their duty to go and like look at this, destroyed child who is like just taking all of the shit of the world upon itself. And then, as it goes on, the kind of like almost like Lagann herself like saying, this sounds like it's probably worth it, right? But strangely enough, there are some people that walk away, or like at the end there's this like very, not strangely phrased, but like it's almost an accusation at the end of like,
sure, yeah,
there are some people that walk away, not most though. Like, most people are willing to like allow this person to suffer for them and watch it happen. And like, is that bad? Like, there's also no moral
judgment
placed upon any side of this. Like, whatever you do, it's just a description of what people do, and you as the reader put the moral judgment on it yourself. So I think it's a really fascinating story in terms of that, and I think that's why this is one of her bigger short stories, and probably why we all seemingly liked it as well. So I'm gonna open it up to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, the story is built around the seed of the theme, right? Like, that's kind of the whole point. That's why, like, maybe it's a little iffy how to parse out plot, at least in our fucking system. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if it doesn't work, then it would fall apart. And I think, of course, it does work. And again, I think it ties into like maybe something, how I want to describe it as like the prevailing sort of social, like artistic mindset, especially in the sci-fi / fantasy sphere, again, of the time. Not to say that that doesn't have any relevance or resonance today, because I think it does. But yeah, because it's built around that one little like sort of vaguely, like you said, Steve, not quite accusatory, but like, hey, here, imagine a world, if you will, etc. And what do you think about it? You decide whether you would or wouldn't, or what you think of the people who do or do not stay, etc. Like in this thought experiment world. So I think because of that, it has to literally stand upon its themes, and I think it does.
Well, the way I always look at it is almost opposite. How many people are you willing to suffer to save one?
This is like the exact opposite.
Well, yeah,
How much you allow? How much you want one to suffer to save everyone?
I'm perfectly content with that. I'm very utilitarian on things, but I think that there's a flaw of like so. Let's say there's 100 people. 99 of them are happy in a perfect society. One has to suffer. Now you alleviate the suffering of that one, and now 50% of people are miserable. Now you're sacrificing the good, the maximal good of everyone for that one individual. Yeah, it would suck to be that one individual. Feel bad for them, but I am. Everyone else is elevated.
Sure.
So there has to be. So that is my reversal of the problem. How many are you willing to go suffer to save one? That's why I hate Captain America.
A question about this: do you think it's implied in here, or do you think it's implied in your own mind as you're reading this that if they stopped torturing this child, that everyone else would suffer? Because I don't think it's actually said anywhere in this story, and I don't think it's even implied that it would be worse for everyone if they stopped letting this person suffer. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's in there. But like
Superstition is built upon false causality. If you stop throwing the virgin into the volcano, the gods might be angry. It might not be, but is that something you're willing to risk?
I think that's just an interesting point. And like, especially while we're talking about themes, is like, is it implicitly said in here that if they stop making this kid suffer, that everyone else will suffer? Or is it just like it's always been done that way? So tradition, baby.
I was going to ask you, Steve, because I don't have the story in front of me. Like usually I print it out, but can't nowadays. But yeah. I could swear, like from my recollection, I thought there was a line or two that was like, it has to be this way for the society to be prosperous, to be free and happy, utopia.
Even if that's the thought of the narrator, that doesn't necessarily make it true.
No, you're right. True. Like it
just be that's interesting. And you know what?
I'm just answering Steve's question. I could swear that
keeps people happy. Let's throw the virgin in the volcano.
I wish I had thought of this argument while I was reading it, or like even right after I read it, and not right now, because then I would have read over it again and tried to figure out if that was the case. But I'll have to go back over it later.
I'm trying to answer your question, buddy, but yeah. I feel like that was my like raw remembrance of reading it.
Well, actually, there is an argument to be made on, in a sense, the power of religion and things like and superstition like this. Theoretically, a society is better off if they have the perception of a certainty by an action, regardless if it's true or not. They live their lives with a little bit more certainty, and they kind of their actions then reflect not the fears of what could come, but their actions reflect the certainty of the utopia. So, yeah, if torturing this one child psychologically makes people act more utopian, then I think it's worth it.
Difference is sort of moot whether or not it's like actually the case. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Pure ideology, as Zajek would say.
Sure. Chris?
She says before she introduces him, do you accept the festival, the city of the joy? No? Then let me describe one more thing. And then she goes on, describes the child. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and read to see, if this one child must suffer for the greater good. But what is she saying? Do you believe in a true utopia? Can there be a true utopia? I mean, that by that one sentence, all of a sudden I'm starting to think, once again, she's putting it to like, can you believe a world where nobody suffers unless there is somebody who suffers? I mean, does that make it more palatable? Like, okay, here's a perfect world. Do you believe it? No. Okay. How about we have one person suffer? And how about in the acknowledgement of it, the suffer, those who actually acknowledge the suffering can no longer live in this utopia. That's the price for not staying in the utopia, is to realize that there is not, nor can there be a utopia.
Interesting point. Thank you for bringing that up. That's fascinating. And she proved I proved her correct with that. There has to be a cost. I firmly believe there has to be a cost.
Your ideology, of course.
To some degree, that's a very good argument, and I agree with you, Chris. That like, I think that the idea of this story is that to allow for a utopia, there has to be some degree of suffering. It's the yin yang of humanity to some degree. Is like, there's nothing there's nothing that doesn't have its cost, right? That's I think that's kind of the idea of this, and it's kind of the theme of it. But that being said, I don't think that anywhere in here, and certainly nothing that you read off, still to this point has like led me to believe that there's somewhere in here that's implicitly said that this suffering is necessary for everyone else to be happy.
No, but my whole point is the thought question is, can you believe in a utopia where there is no cost to be paid?
Yes.
And can you
answer that question is yes. Ian.
No, I'm just saying she's asking the question. She's not giving the answer.
No, I know.
She's asking the question. The question she's positing is, and Ian answered it. Can there be a yin without a yang? I mean, can like 100 people be happy without one person suffering?
Yeah, I mean, maybe
100 people be happy without 100 people suffering. That's a better question.
Maybe it's my own
rabbit hole on that.
Certainly, I think we're about to, but like, or maybe we can avoid that. But
I'm going to try and cut that off right now. But
maybe it's my own bias too. The way like I thought that was the implication, but it could not be. Like, and maybe that proves the whole strength of the themes, anyways, is that you can get these various facets out of it, and still then rabbit hole yourself into a further philosophical conundrum.
Into rabbit hell.
I just want to toss some people into a volcano.
Yeah, well,
not that. Thank you, buddy.
I mean, that's always the dark side of humanity. I guess it's more of like you can be 99% good. Like maybe this is just a metaphor for like the human, like one human being, right? Like you can try to be as good as you can, but there's always like that small dark side of you that wants something, and that's humanity in general. But anyway, I think we're all going to give it ones for themes. Yeah.
Yeah. If I may say one more thing, and I'm totally not trolling you, but one of the reasons,
I don't believe you.
One of the reasons that Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek is because no, hold on a second. But this is the point: is that they're positing this question and showing that the Federation X, Y, and Z people can live in paradise so long as they accept people who are not part of that. They cannot comprehend their former barbarism, when in fact people are still struggling, still suffering. Well, why can't you live like me? I mean, the thing is to challenge conceit. And yes, I do bring it up a lot, but in this case, we're talking about it's a societal conceit. It's creating a norm, and can everybody live to that norm? What is acceptable? Like I said, I have to admit, I read this piece and then I read it again and listened to the audio of it because it was just too much for me to comprehend. And as we're talking, I'm peeling away more layers and finding more.
Chris, does watching Star Trek make you a Borg-like figure that you visualize the entire world through only Star Trek?
Now that's a fucking rabbit hole, buddy.
No. I don't.
Hold on. Chris.
Actually, I was going to use two different examples.
Don't answer it.
You can answer in 10 words or less. Go.
I was actually going to use a musical representation before I read those two lines. I'm like, well, fuck.
10 words.
I feel like we're over 10 words. All right.
Fuck it. I'm not. Brevity is not a strong suit of mine.
We're moving on. All right. One's all around the themes. Scott, talk to us about Antag.
All right. Well, this is maybe ties into the next question too. Like, I guess maybe not, because I suppose the whole point of the story, as you just talked out at length, is that maybe it makes you, the reader, your own antagonist. Like, or is the society, the fictional society / quote unquote utopia, then become one once you know their dark secret? Like the secret to their happiness is dependent upon the suffering of one of the members of their society, and how does that like then reflect back upon your views and ideologies, etc., as we just talked out? So if I take it to be like that angle, then I'd probably give it a 1. But like if we take it to be, of course, within like the strict narrative of the story, then like I don't know, man. Like it's a weird one to split up. But I'm saying my gut reaction wants me to give it a 1 because of the way it sort of mentally, one of you said mentally, goes beyond what it is, on the surface, if you will. So that's how I'm viewing it to start with, at least. So what do you guys slice it up as?
Well, Ian, I know you're chopping at the bit over there, so if you want to go first, go ahead.
I made the argument before that the reader is invited to be an active participant in this work. And by reading it and by finishing the work, you have accepted the contract that you are a character in this thought experiment.
I like
Thus, the reader himself or herself can be considered a protagonist, antagonist, and supporting characters. And I think that its reflection, because its intended thing is to have you reflect upon your own morality, I think that backs up the point you were making.
Yeah, thank you.
What I'll say, I think that's a good argument, but I'm gonna not disagree, but I'm gonna put another argument out. I think that the narrator is the antagonist of this, because the idea is the narrator paints this, and I as a reader felt antagonized by like halfway through this story.
Sure.
There's this picture painted, and then it's like, all right, but now you have to swallow this to believe that this first part is true. You have to swallow the second part. That's, and clearly no one's going to wish this on a child or whatever. Well, maybe some people would, but we'll not get into that. But like the idea is like the narrator is forcing you into your own choice. Are you one who walks away, or are you one who stays? And like, I feel antagonized by the narrator throughout the course of this. And like, it's so weird. Like, it gets so meta. Like, that's why I mentioned that it like feels kind of meta in terms of plot earlier, because it gets so meta to me where I'm like, oh, this isn't about like anything that's going on in the story. This is about like you and me, Ursula and Steve, like fucking going at it. And like you being like, what the fuck is your deal? Like Ursula being like, what the fuck is your deal, Steve Hermosi? And me being like, oh, now I gotta like go and figure my shit out. Like I gotta figure out what I think about this, like it sends you into this kind of loop. And I feel like I don't want to call myself the protagonist of this story, but I feel like I'm the one being antagonized for sure. So, and I think it does a very good job of that. On to you guys.
I like that angle too. Good.
You have a fair point for antagonism. I mean, I agree with Scott and Ian, but you make a good point, because Steve-O, what you were saying just occurred to me that there is no third option in this. You either stay and ignore or acknowledge and walk away. There is no part of it about fighting for somebody you don't know, or working towards change. Would you be willing to throw Utopia in its face to acknowledge the fact that it cannot be a utopia if one person suffers?
I would say it is brought up that most people acknowledge and stay.
Yeah,
like most people go and like visit,
but the question's never asked.
Sure, it's not a question. It's a here's what happens. You live here, and you can leave if you want. You don't have to stay. It's not a question. It's like, do you feel comfortable knowing this and staying, or are you going to walk away?
There is a fascinating point that you brought up, Steve, in that if I feel like I am the antagonist in this, then the narrator is the protagonist. If you feel that the narrator is the antagonist, you are the protagonist.
Yeah, that's awesome too.
And I think that it also reflects morality and ethics and what your choice would be. Whether you recognize that, I think that says a lot about the individual as much as it mentally like this story does. So I am giving it a 1 as I am perhaps the antagonist here, and I'm also sorry for cutting off the narrator. I think is the protagonist.
I love that.
I think it's a fascinating discussion.
I love that. All right,
all these angles, I'm still ended up giving it a 1 for the very fact that you can get all those angles again. A la themes.
Strong 1, Chris. What do you think?
I'm giving it a 1.
All right, cool. Keep talking. Protagonist. What do you think the protagonist is, buddy?
Well, I'm going to be a real pain in the ass and say because I agreed with everybody on the antagonist, because I feel that she gives you so much rope to hang yourself that at any given I don't feel a totality in any of this. I feel antagonized because she's posing these situations and asking me these things, but I also feel antagonized by the fact that I'm antagonizing myself because I'm interjecting my nature and wanting the third option.
Sure.
So by the same token, I'm going to give half to the narrator and half to me. And in this case, I'm going to give half to the narrator and half to me because I don't believe in absolutes. I believe that, as my eighth grade art teacher said when we were discussing behaviorism versus psychoanalysis, Freud versus Skinner.
Your eighth grade.
I said, I don't understand what the big to do is. They both have points. And he said to me, you're going to find that the world's shades of grays. It is rarely, if ever, black and white. And this is the way I think this story is an extremely good example of that. I do not feel like saying 100% I am the antagonist or the narrator is the antagonist, nor do I feel, because I feel like there is just, at any given point, both are true and either can be true or neither can be true. I hope I'm not overblowing this, but again, as we're talking, my perception of this keeps changing. It is parts of it are reinforced and expanded upon. The funny thing is, in our discussions, nothing's ever taken away. There's only things that are added to how I interpreted this thing. So every time you guys speak, I'm bringing more to the conversation and finding more avenues where all these things are true, because it's such a precise world, but such a vague world at the same time. There's a song by the Grateful Dead called Terrapin Station, which is my favorite song of all time. And the whole thing is, it's a morality. The first part of it, Lady in the Fan, is the whole Lady and the Tiger thing. It's basically a morality tale. And the thing at the end of it, it says, you decide if he was wise, meaning the person who chose the lady over the, who decided to take this chance. But the thing is, I feel this is the same thing, but more. The storyteller makes no choice. I'm about to sing lyrics, but the storyteller is not trying to influence you one way or another. The storyteller is posing a situation and posing some stuff. And this is why I'm going to stop talking. I just want to explain to you why I'm giving half and half to both, and in order to give both the one. That's all.
I do like that you're giving yourself a 1 since you place yourself as protagonist, but
and antagonist.
Yeah, well, that might be why
Janus.
That might be why I end up doing it, because of the fact that the way the story is constructed and presented to you, that one can do that. So, like, while I might not personally do it myself, or at least have thought of it, or at least again upon first reading done it that way, the fact that it's there and possible might be the thing that convinces me to give it a 1 to this question at this point. So, what do you guys think?
I kind of love the idea of that. I'm not going to give myself per se the protagonist role, but I'm going to give the reader in general the protagonist role.
I got you.
And I embody the reader in my read through, but I also have now 3 other people who have read through it in their own, like, and telling me about it in their own way. And you could go through this with everybody who's read this story, like, you can go read reviews and stuff like that. And then they're all there. It's a new protagonist to the story, which I think is really fascinating, right? Like, everybody that reads this,
yeah, I like that.
Come back and like talk about it. And if you're not doing just like a straight up, like, by the book review, then you're going to have to talk about the philosophy of this story. And as soon as you do, you become a new protagonist. You become a new member of this town, right? This Omelas, and you become somebody who has to answer this question themselves. And I think that is the most fascinating thing about this, is like, she made everybody that reads this story a member of this town and also a protagonist of her story. And I think that's fucking crazy, and I'm going to give it a strong 1 for that.
One, my big question though was Terrapin Station played in Star Trek?
No, it was not.
Not
That
yet.
was actually the
That
song
comes
that was
from
being used
Whistle
before.
I think
But I'm
Chris's life
glad
will
I
be
saved it.
Discovery.
I'm glad. No, I'm actually that was I was going to use that for the antagonist, but I'm glad I saved it for protagonist because it seemed to gel better for me.
I think Chris's head would explode if that were the case. If that ever happened. But no, I mean, in seriousness, I do like the angles that you can get out of it. I think that's why I'm going to end up also giving it a 1 at the end of the day too.
Is that everybody at 1?
I think so.
Okay.
Although I view the protagonist as the narrator and I'm the antagonist.
Yeah. So I mean, if you want
You're the
to
villain.
expand on that at all, or if you're good,
Oh, I'm always the villain. It's fine.
I know you have you did a little bit of that earlier on antagonist. So let's move on. We're going to talk about supporting characters.
Mhm.
Ian.
Because of the way we framed this question, and because the town. Now, you can argue that the way you did that every single reader is a supporting character in your own arc or a member of this town. I think we gave credit where credit's due in a protagonist and antagonist. Because the world is a dream state built of yourself and your own imagery and how these characters act, I cannot, with good conscience, pull out the necessary bullshit to suggest that you can give this a 1. So I'm giving supporting characters a 0, not by fault of the story, but just the nature of how this is shaped.
Thank you. I pretty much agree. I 100% follow suit. I was going to maybe earlier make the case about the child being the secondary, but given what, like you said, E, what we just said, I think in all good faith, I will have to give it a 0 here.
I think the child is a secondary character, and also the child is a plot device, so it can't be a good, like, unless it was given, like, it's called it throughout. Like, you don't know anything about this kid other than that it's completely destroyed by, like, yeah, it's just like wading through a river of shit its entire life, and that's all you know. So there's nothing about the child. There's just about the situation that the child is dealing with. So I can't give that a 1 for supporting. So I'm going to have to agree it's a 0.
Yes.
Every time I read the description of the child, I kept thinking in the arms of an angel.
Jesus Christ.
By no means.
3 cents a year. You can make for 3 cents a year. You can make a child in Omelas, a normal human being.
What are you giving it, Chris? While you recover.
I was gonna say that I'm now glad we went to the MOTS scale because I was afraid we were gonna lose. I wasn't sure going through this how we were going to gain or lose the nuances, but I think that the MOTS scale once again proves to be accurate, and
It always works.
Hey, all right. But yeah, I agree with you guys because if she is posing a question, if she is posing a hypothetical, then once again that child may or may not exist. And because it is just given the vagary, it is given only what we need to counterbalance the Utopia. It may or may not be there, so it's got to get a 0.
All right, sounds good. So 0's all around for, supporting, and we're gonna move on to dialogue, and that's me. This is an interesting one. There's not much dialogue in this. There is some.
All right, so
And I will read it to you right now.
Okay, please. Yeah, thank you. Like, I actually did. I legit wanted to ask you.
Never say anything, but the child who has not always lived in the tool room and can remember sunlight and its mother's voice sometimes speaks. I will be good. It says, "Please let me out. I will be good." And you know what? I am almost like on a fucking 1 on this. Is like just like the pleas of a child as like the only dialogue in something. What a bold move. But no, I mean there's not really any dialogue in this. There's also, hold on, here's the one. The other one. The horses rear on their slender legs, and some of them neigh and whisper. Sober-faced, the young riders stroke the horses' necks and soothe their whispering. Quiet, quiet, there, my beauty, my hope. They begin to form a rank along the starting line. So, like, you know, there's
flavor.
Like 3 or 4 lines of dialogue in this whole thing, and they're not much. This isn't about the dialogue. It's even the dialogue that's actually in this is like, this is what they probably would say type of like lines and things like that. So, but that's what the whole thing is. I'm going to probably give this a 0 for dialogue, but not from any fault of the story itself, but just because the entire thing is a thought experiment. So the only lines of dialogue are like, hey, maybe these guys would say this at this moment because that's what will forward this philosophical question to you. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean that I agree, and that's also largely why I'm giving a 0 as well. But in my mind now, granted, I read the story a couple of days ago. I don't remember there being a single line of like, in quotes, in all ways possible dialogue at all. And I think that's a sign on top of what we both just said to probably give it a 0. Again, like, not that's bad or whatever, but just the, again, nature of the story and of the structure itself. That's why I'm sticking with it.
By the way, if it is a utopia, Star Trek proves this, they're not going to have any creativity to them themselves. And if it's my individual utopia, my inner dialogue isn't all that great. So it falls apart there as well. So no matter what level you work on, it's got to be a 0.
What are the Borg's? Chris? What are the Borg's inner monologue like?
You're ping ponging back, and you're trolling me back. No,
I've had a lot of coffee before
think
this.
that
I
any
apologize.
dialogue here is a flavor. Would you say, Ian?
And a lot
I
of
had a lot of coffee before this, so I'm feeling a
Settle
little
down.
to
Yeah, I'm.
follow you all of Star Trek.
getting real uppity on you, Chris.
That's fine. That's why I said I wasn't trying to troll you guys before. But no, seriously, dude. I mean, I frame my immediate frame goes to like 3 or 4 different things.
I understand.
Science fiction or music are basically the things I frame most stuff out of. But
in terms of dialogue,
Le Guin is a science fiction author, but again, the dialogue goes to the is I think, Steve-O, you said it is kind of like the flavoring. It's to reinforce the ideas. It's to give an extra layer of color. It's not really dialogue, so I cannot give it a 1.
yeah,
That's well said too. I like
it's almost hardly there. So let's talk about style, Scott, which is very much there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I don't want to say it's both style and substance, which is something we said before, right? And I think it ties heavily into themes. Like I think whoever said, yeah, sure, if you really wanted to, you could distill this story into a 3-sentence thing, but it works because it isn't that. The picture is vividly and dreamlike. One of you said almost surrealistically painted for you, right? So, and she does such a good job of it. Of course, like she's a very famous author, again, from the era and of sci-fi in general, that, yeah, it works, like, because of the way she builds her style and her prose, that it ties into the major elements that she's trying to convey to you as the reader. So I think you have to give it a 1 because it's intrinsically linked with the other elements that are the core part of this story, of this piece. So.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think that this is a very strong stylistic work. Almost a little bit reminded me, like, it's not that it's built in the same way, but like in that it raised questions that hit me the same way as like No Exit, which we read, I think, last year or maybe 2 years ago.
It's funny you should say that. That came to my mind a lot.
In the same way, it kind of hit me like No Exit, and like I just love the way that this story is framed. I felt like when I started reading it, I was a little bit, like, the first 2 paragraphs, I was a little bit concerned because they're just like giant blocks of text. But like it got more and more of like fascinating to me as I went through it, and like I was really enwrapped by the end of it. I really love this, and especially, and I think the style has a lot to do. Like her style of writing has
Certainly
the reason that I liked it. So yeah, that's me.
I agree, and I made a lot of the points for style earlier on, and I think they still it's just fantastic.
They obviously still apply here.
Yeah.
I'm giving style a 1, but I was just curious. Is it worth the happiness of millions if we sacrifice one hedge fund?
Yes. Hedge funds are not
we just
people.
found out it was. Yes. So.
I will sacrifice 1,000,000 hedge funds for the happiness of one.
That's
It's worth it in both scenarios.
Fair enough.
I think we can
Back
agree.
again. All right, Chris, keep talking. Recommendation.
I absolutely positively recommend this story. I don't think if we've made it clear enough that this is the proverbial onion, that it's got many layers. It is a 4-page philosophical question.
Like Shrek.
It poses no judgment. And allows you to interpret and to expand upon it. And I think we've done that to the best of our abilities. And yeah, I highly recommend it. It's just it is a great think piece.
I mean, yeah, I 100% agree. I do recommend it. Again, it's also short enough. It's not much of a commitment if that's a concern of yours, time-wise. And yeah, it's a great piece from, again, one of the greats of the genre, writing at the height of the era, or in that era at least. And it's actually funny, Steve-O, like I've read, you said, I think one of you, if not you haven't really read a lot of Ursula's stuff. I've read a couple of things here and there, just not this one, but I still definitely recommend it.
Not only do I recommend this, but I don't recommend it in isolation. This is a book club read.
No,
This is a good discussion read, and I think you get a lot more out of it by the conversations that you have from it.
Yeah,
so that's the caveat I have on this, that it should be shared by a multitude of people. For that now thing, the idea is that the reflection of yourself and others and how they interpret it is what's important.
Yep, good call.
That's a really great point. I absolutely recommend this too. I recommended this story, and the reason that I recommended it was because I haven't read enough Ursula Le Guin or any of it, really, any of her stuff really, and I've been meaning to do it for years, and I was up to kind of, or somebody was up to recommend a lit, and I looked up some of her short stories.
I can't believe you never read The
This
Left Hand of
one-
Darkness. That's like her most famous stuff.
This one was highly recommended though, as like a short story as opposed to like one of her novellas, because I know she has several novellas as well,
That is enough.
and also novels, obviously. But like, yeah, I think that this is great, and I look forward to reading more of her stuff in the future. So, yeah, I think that's ones for everybody, right? Anybody else have anything else to talk about?
This is one of my favorite works we've done here. I think the person I've explored the most coming out of our lit one is Arthur Machen. That I feel that I want to explore. Perhaps this is the work that makes me want to reread this and read more of her. So I hold Machen very highly, and so I'm looking forward to reading more of her work.
And to Ian, to your point, to not read this in a vacuum, if you can't discuss this right away, reread it while you're listening to an audio. There's a few people on YouTube that actually do readings of this. They've ranged from 15 to 20 minutes. That really helped pull me out of it because I got lost in it when I read it in a vacuum.
Sure.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I think it's well worth a read for everybody. And you bring up Machen. I love this. I love the style of it, and there's a reason Ursula Le Guin is one of the big wigs of sci-fi. So,
yeah, man.
It's going to come down, and granted, I'm going to give it the worst score, but it's 3 7s and a 6. We all gave it 0s on supporting. We all gave it 0s on dialogue, and I gave it a 1 on plot as opposed to a 2, which everybody else gave it. Which is going to make it a 6.75.
But the score is not important here.
Overall.
The score much better.
That's absolutely what I was just going to say.
It's not reflective per se.
The
Yes.
score is
Put that in the description.
The score is
take that.
not reflective of how important and interesting of a work this is. It's a failing of our
No, it's not a failing of the system because we were able to dissect it more. And no, I even think on our 0s there's something to
it's a failing of a
acknowledge within the
binary
story.
scale. It's a failing of a binary scale in terms of this story.
Not a failure, just some limitation.
That's why we have these discussions, because there is sometimes more to stories than what comes down on the binary and on the scores.
Yeah,
so
sure.
That being said, I'm glad that I got to talk about it with you guys, and I hope that no one has just looked at our score and just left it at that.
I actually agree with the asterisk. We should probably put a warning that.
I'll take care of it in the description. Fix it in post.
That's all good. But we're gonna call it a night on this one. I have been your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Jonathan Ian Manzer,
A Binary World.
Scott Thurlow,
Fuck, I could watch your kid be locked in the closet all day. I don't give a fuck. Whatever.
and Christopher Morgan.
Nothing left to do but smile, smile, smile.
Good night.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Hermosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.